Are you interested in a career in cybersecurity? Are you currently in law enforcement and looking to learn more about technology and cybersecurity? If so, please consider joining us for our master's degree in cybercrime and digital investigation from Michigan State University. Experience a nationally ranked program taught by world-renowned researchers like my two co-hosts on this show and practitioners that can help you play a role in combating cybercrime and advancing justice for victims. This is designed to be completed in as little as 2 years and in a flexible online format that works with your schedule. Visit cj.msu.edu to learn more. We hope you can join us. Welcome, everybody, to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. My name is Tom Holt. I'm a professor here in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University. I'm also the director for the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training. And I'm here with my excellent co-host, as always.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rachel McNealey. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Criminal Justice and an associate with the center. And here in spirit with us today is Dr. Taylor Fisher, our postdoc with the center.
Unfortunately, she is sick, so she had to miss this rather special episode. But it gives us the opportunity to jump right in with our guest, who is the Director of Evidence-Based Practice at the Global Consortium Group, Mike Newman. Mike, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, so the podcast is usually built around us having conversations around issues in cybercrime and cybersecurity, and we wanted to have you on because we know you've had years and years of experience in this topic in law enforcement. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into policing in the first place?
Yeah, look, I joined policing as a fresh-faced 22-year-old, so a little while ago, a little bit over 30 years ago, about 33 years ago. So, been a little while. I was always just interested in policing. Obviously, young, even in high school, I was excited by policing, probably just the excitement of it all. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about being able to actually make a difference in the community.
And how did you wind up doing cyber? Because I know that's been a part of your role in the police force.
Yeah, look, it has. I came into cyber late in my policing career, but it's always been an interest for me. I've always been interested in computers and computing as a kid. So, even back as far as high school, the school would loan you the computers on school holidays. I'd go home and type code. When I was in policing, I didn't actually go to university after leaving high school. I went straight into work with the Magistrates Court and then into policing. But it was whilst I was actually working as a police officer, about 10 years into my career, believe it or not, that I've actually sat there and gone, you know what, I don't have any other credentials. So, and I had tried to study business and it just bored me. I tried studying law and that was worse. Yes, I'm a police officer. I deal with laws all the time, but it was horrible. And anyway, I've sat there and gone, well, what actually holds my interest? So I've looked and actually went and did an IT degree. That held my interest. Sailed through that. It was fantastic and got really good grades. And so next thing I'm like, okay, what do I do now? So I went and got a master's in IT, but I came a little bit closer back to what I need to do. So it was IT and business that I did a master's in. And now I'm actually gone straight back into policing. I'm doing the PhD around criminology. So, so coming to cybercrime, I actually had I'm very fortunate to actually be the Detective Chief Inspector at our Cybercrime squad in policing. So I've got a background, most of my background in policing is as a detective. I've been in regional crime squads, I've run tactical crime squads, regional CIBs, Criminal Investigation Bureaus, and that's where I've spent most of my time. I suggest to you my first cyber arrest would have been 2002. So this was when we had a group of local students who were using the school's internet to actually create credit cards, using credit card generators back in the day. They went and bought all these goods with these stolen credit cards, with the generated credit cards, and had it all shipped to themselves. Fairly easy, not rocket scientists, obviously, not probably getting good grades at the school either, but hey. So that was my first foray into cyber, but again, from an investigator's perspective. But yeah, as I said, I had the opportunity to lead the Cybercrime Squad for a good couple of years here in Queensland, and actually get to implement the cybercrime strategy that was developed, and look at how we can actually improve things, how we can actually scale up what we do to actually have some impact in the community. Bearing in mind we're a state-based agency for a crime type that actually doesn't recognise borders.
Mm-hmm.
And given that you're coming from Australia, it's always interesting for us to have that international perspective and get a little sense of how different agencies in different places work. How would you say cybercrime fits into the Australian policing landscape, especially at the local level, since that's been a lot of your experience?
Yeah, look, I've had experience at both the local and with the national perspective. Given that we actually do work fairly collaboratively with all the other jurisdictions, as I said, the crime type doesn't know boundaries, so we've got to work very much more collaboratively. And when you look at the majority of our threat actors are actually offshore or outside, at the very least outside of our jurisdiction, we have to be a lot more collaborative than organised crime or other like your drugs and all that, who actually have to have physical products or physical presence in a jurisdiction. That's not necessary for cybercrime. So we're very collaborative from that perspective. I was saying to you previously that we've had a lot of interest in cybercrime, particularly when over probably about 3 or 4 years ago, where we had the large data breaches with our Optus Telecommunications, with Medibank Private, and a range of other large agencies. There was a lot of interest in cybercrime and some federal investment from that perspective. We're coming off the back of that, and it's becoming almost white noise again, because it happens so often, happens so much. People are now probably expecting it to happen. We're not taking it, I'd suggest, and this is my personal opinion, not taking it as seriously as we actually need to, given that this is a crime that occurs every day and is impacting people significantly every day.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that touches on a big point around cyber, right? Which is when the impacts aren't visible, you don't necessarily always get a lot of political momentum, social momentum, and right, that's where the monies and the momentum come from for looking into those kinds of things. And you mentioned that policing for you is being able to make a difference. And I think that's a refrain that we hear a lot for why people don't want to investigate cyber crimes, because they seem like something you can't make a difference in the community in. So how has that looked for you?
So, yes and no. There are things and ways that we can actually tackle this, that we can actually make a difference. But from my perspective, you're right. We're not going to arrest our way out of this. We actually have to take very much a preventative focus on it, and that's where a lot of the. So I've gone around the world and on a Churchill Fellowship. And I've spoken with law enforcement agencies and the networks that support them to deliver their cybercrime responses, to see what each and every one is doing. And that is a primary focus around the world as well, is prevention. Because everybody realises when you start looking at the fact that there's threat actors in jurisdictions with no treaties, with threat actors actually being supported by state agencies and the like, we're not going to be able to arrest these people. The best we can do a lot of times is actually put sanctions on them. Now, these sanctions, whilst living in their own countries, not probably going to have a great deal of effect. If they want to travel, etc., yes, it may well have some effect, but I don't see a deterrence effect for sanctions. It is something to say we're doing something for the community. I agree that it's actually important that we actually do these to say, hey, we've identified who it is, we've done as much as we can do about it. But we're never going to arrest our way out of it, and that's where prevention and detection actually comes very much to the fore. But as I said, there's some investigative strategies we can actually undertake to actually improve or multiply the impact that we have, and that's not chasing every little case, every little cybercrime case, but start to look for the aggregators, start to look for the common money wallets, the common email addresses, common phone numbers, the common platforms that are being used, the common digital exchanges that they're funneling cryptocurrency through. Look for what's actually facilitating the crime, target those areas to make it harder for them to do their business. Unfortunately, are we ever going to stop them? No, because there's digital exchanges get stood up that are more than happy to operate illegitimately or in jurisdictions that we don't have access to.
One of the things that really surprised me, you mentioned the Optus and the Medibank breaches in the Australian response, was that the government actually provided reimbursement for getting IDs after the incident. That's such an interesting and different response from anything we see here, where typically the response from a company after a breach is, here's your identity theft protection for the next couple of months. But there's nothing really in terms of that repair or victim assistance in that direct fashion. And I feel like that's a really nice example of not necessarily prevention, but at least a demonstration government response to a breach that goes beyond the typical and suggests some actual concern for victims.
Yeah, and I'd suggest that it's not just the government that had the concern for the victims from those perspectives, and it was about those organisations actually building their brands back up as well. They needed to actually build some trust back with the community, with their communities, and they were the ones who were actually funding the identity. The government and the agency were both funding the replacement of the credentials, or the replacement of hacked credentials. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, in the preventative efforts that you've seen be successful, what do those look like? Do they focus on target hardening or more? I mean, you mentioned deterrence, but I know that's a mixed bag in terms of viability for these kinds of things.
Yeah, and it very much is. From a prevention perspective, my answer is it depends. It depends on what context you're looking at. But if we want to look at it from a public education campaign perspective, the Singapore Police do a fantastic job. They've got a public education office, a scam public education office, which basically creates all the collateral, creates all the material, and pumps it out. And they actually test treat it like a marketing campaign, and they test it prior to, during, and post deployment of their scam campaigns. So they're actually taking an evidence-based approach to their scam prevention material, so they can start to determine if they're getting bang for buck for what they're doing. Mm-hmm. If we want to look at it from a different perspective and look at offender prevention, the Netherlands are killing it. They have an entire offender prevention continuum, which ranges from 8-year-olds through to adults, and all stages across that continuum of offending, to obviously kids in school who are starting to learn about computers and digital technology, all the way through to those who are actually undertaking hacking and what they can actually do to divert them or to make things more difficult for them. So, yeah, from a lot of respect for what the Netherlands police are doing from that perspective, particularly in and around offenders.
Mm.
So you mentioned your Churchill and you traveling to various agencies across the world. What would you say is the one thing that you picked up across all the places you visited? What's sort of the common thread you noted in what you saw?
The common thread, I'd suggest, is collaboration. Everybody wants more of it. We're all still operating in silos. As much as we're doing from collective efforts, which is great. Like, I know here in Australia, we've got the Joint Policing Cybercrime Coordination Centre, which is run by the Australian Federal Police down in Sydney. Each jurisdiction puts officers into that, so we've got a collaborated effort in Australia. The US have the NCFTA, who actually host international jurisdictions as well, which is fantastic. Europol obviously has their place in their JCAT, which again bring police from around Europe and also from around the world. CELEC do the same for the Balkan states. But they're still operating silos. There's no connectivity between these agencies. There's very little threat intelligence sharing. There's very little collaboration in and around what's actually happening. The one thing that I'd actually loved to see more of is what the NCFTA does with their operational sprints. So they actually host an international task force for about a month each year. They bring in jurisdictions from around the world to actually work on their current problems. So where the operators. So this isn't the bosses getting together. This is the operators. This is the investigators. These are the actual experts getting together and talking about where their sticking points are, learning from others where they may have had a workaround previously, and essentially upskilling each other in a very informal basis, and then and progressing their investigations during that period. That's proven to be very successful. If we can do something, and they, as I said, they do that on an international basis. That's something that we actually need to do more, but in each jurisdiction as well, and emulate that model so that we're actually working. We can upskill each other in our own countries, but then we can actually send experts to things like the NCFTA for that month to learn those tips and tricks from others as well. So, from an investigative perspective, there are ways we can actually build our capability with the experts we currently have.
Now, I know that in modern policing, information sharing, right, and collaboration between agencies, and I suppose I'm speaking from a U.S. central perspective, right? We have the emergence of fusion centers, right, to encourage these different levels of our decentralized policing to talk to one another. But now with the breadth of what these modern crimes look like, it takes international collaboration between these big agencies. But it's people. It's individuals working in those levels, working with each other.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is, and that's the a lot of the good work in policing, and particularly with in relation to cybercrime, happens through the networking, the goodwill, and the hard work of individual police officers. In the fact that they go and establish these networks, they utilise these networks. Because we're still dealing with legal frameworks that were written for traditional crimes, so the MLATs or the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaties, they're written for traditional crimes. They're very important, but they're a very slow process. Obviously, as you're aware, with cybercrime, we need to actually improve the speed of those processes. And one of the things I actually recommend in the report is we actually need to look at adopting the Budapest Conventions internationally, so that we can actually be operating off the same, if not very similar, legislation to actually be able to encourage or at least allow intelligence information sharing on a much easier basis. And that's what I mean. Like, there are issues even in Australia with sharing between jurisdictions, and it can be a slower, more cumbersome process. But the thing is, it's been proven that you can actually get around those issues, like the NCFTA, who host international jurisdictions. They get together and talk about these things. Their clearances, etc., are obviously already pre-mapped. They know what they're doing. They know who they're talking to. They've got the relevant MOUs in place, so they can talk about and share this information. So there's examples out there where this is already being done. We just need to clear the hurdles, or basically get those hurdles out of the road to actually be able to do this in different jurisdictions, different countries, and emulate what's already being done.
So can you tell us a little bit about the Global Consortium? What is it?
Yeah, so look, Global Consortium Group is it's a new group that's probably started roughly around about 12 months ago. It's a group of public safety experts that have all had experience in policing, emergency services, counter-terrorism, public safety operations from around the world. So it's a group of people who bring pretty much over 200 years of frontline policing and frontline strategic experience to the fore. So what they're actually looking at doing is providing advice into different agencies for different businesses, different organisations in and around public safety agencies, in and around digital transformation, evidence-based practice. There's a strategic advisory arm. We have training and leadership arm, and also look at well-being. So well-being of frontline employees as well. So it's we've got subject matter experts from all of those different areas that we can call on, that we can actually provide assistance to either different organisations. It doesn't necessarily need to be public safety, but public safety related agencies is our priority focus, and the mission is that obviously we want to save lives and protect communities worldwide by supporting public safety organisations, and we'll work with industry, we'll work with other agencies to actually help facilitate that as well.
So the evidence-based arm, it sounds like there are a lot of different missions of these various parts. And so evidence-based to me, does this mean tactics or approaches that have been, tested and using randomized control trials? This is me as a non-policing scholar asking more about what evidence-based really means in that context.
So evidence-based policing or evidence-based practice, from my perspective, if you can do a randomised control trial, that's absolutely the gold standard. But it's not the only evidentiary standard from that perspective. And I probably will refer to Jerry Ratcliffe's and Larry Sherman's hierarchies, the Maryland scale methods, and Jerry's actually gone and co-opted that into what works, what's promising, and what's questionable type of aspects. So I like to look at what works, what's promising, and trust me, my resumes for my promotions over the years have probably fallen more into the what's questionable. Because I will say I only came into evidence-based policing, evidence-based practice probably a bit over 10 years ago now. And it was a light bulb moment for me because I did what traditionally every police officer's done before. I know how to do this. I've got a sense, I've got an idea of what's going on. I know what to do, gut feel, and if I put resources at this problem, it's going to drop the crime rate. Yeah, okay. I could have just waited for the weather to turn cold. Would have had probably just as much of an impact. There was no way I could actually prove causation or correlation with what I actually did to the impact that it had on the decreasing crime. I can tell you, I claimed it in my resume to say yes, I did this, and it had a drop in crime. Obviously, I never claimed it if the crime rate rose. But from an evidence-based perspective, yeah, I'm always looking for at least a control group, at least a comparison group to compare things with. Yeah, I'd prefer for it to be unbiased, but if there's got to be an element of bias, because not everything can be an RCT. Sometimes we've got to introduce and implement things all at once, or when you're looking at an area or an organisation even as large as Queensland. Like Queensland, the state itself is 2.5 times the size of Texas. So you can't implement everything at once. But so we can actually implement like the rollout of, say, body-worn cameras. We can implement that in different stations in different times. We pick the stations, we pick where we're doing. We do it as time series analysis, and we've still got an evidence-based comparison. The other thing is that from an evidence-based practice perspective, the RCTs will only tell you what works, or those types of trials will tell you what works, not why it works. So I'm a big believer in the fact that we actually need mixed methods. We actually need the qualitative piece. We need to talk to people. We need to understand why it worked to actually understand the full impact of trials and the like. So. And this is the offering that we have. We can actually consult with different agencies. So we're looking to, and this is not just public safety, but different agencies actually looking to actually test their products from do they want to be evidence-based? Do they actually want to be able to prove the value or the impact that their products can have? We can come in and actually provide a research evaluation framework. We can actually deliver the research evaluation. We've got experts from around the world that we can actually tap into, particularly through the Societies of Evidence-Based Policing. So I've been involved with the Australian New Zealand Society of Evidence-Based Policing now for over 10 years. We're actually doing a global collaboration panel at the upcoming IACP in October. So we'll have evidence-based police officers from the evidence-based policing societies in the UK, Australia, US, Canada and the Netherlands in a panel talking about the work that they're actually doing in this area to actually understand what works in policing. So it's, there's a great deal of evidence out there. It's probably 20 years on from when Larry first coined the term evidence-based policing, or if you want to go back a few more years, Jeff Alpert does like to claim that he coined a very similar term about using evidence, about using data as evidence. So I'll let those two fight it out as to who actually came up with the idea, but both of them are very big proponents in this area and very much leading the way, and have really set the standard for us to actually follow. And as I said, for me, it was a light bulb moment to actually understand we can actually rigorously test what we do and determine if it's actually how much impact, what impact, or is it actually having a backfire effect.
That seems like the sort of thing that I know we've talked about a little bit here, like phishing campaigns and phishing education awareness. It's a great idea in theory, but can it be backed up by practice, by evidence to suggest, yes, this tool has X amount of impact on the click-through rate? And that's the kind of thing that I never really see in full, but it's always interesting to know if that's in the background for some companies and some entities.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was part of the idea when I was doing the Churchill, because one of the things that I struggled with when I was actually running the Cybercrime squad is that I set up a prevention and engagement team. And now we were going out there, we were delivering messages, we were going to local exhibition shows like our local city shows, we were going to caravanning shows, we were going to schools, we were going to community groups and delivering all these public presentations. And I was getting on the news and delivering messages, all that sort of stuff. But I couldn't actually tell you how much of an impact that was having. And when I looked at the investment in that, if you look at the salaries of the officers that I invested in that, I was probably investing $500,000 a year. Just in salaries, just in kind time for police, let alone the production costs, all that sort of things that was being involved. I couldn't tell you what level of impact that was having. So one of the questions I asked when I travelled around was, how are you aware of what impact your prevention's having? And that's how I came across Singapore, and the fact that they've like, yeah, well, we measure it. I'm like, that's fantastic. They're probably one of the only countries that actually do set about measuring it, particularly in an evidence-based perspective like that. Do they have a control group? No, but they've got, at the very least, the before, during, and after, which is fantastic from that perspective. So for me, it's in and around having a look at how we can actually measure the campaigns, measure what we do. Some of that is in and around community sentiment, and some of that's we've done some process evaluation of other work and things like that, where we can actually drop community sentiment surveys into a specific area, particularly where we might actually go towards doing an intervention. Again, pre and post, we can at the very least do it from that perspective, but we will go also looking for a comparative control group to actually then test and see if the community sentiment in those areas has changed as a result of whatever we might have been doing. So there are ways we can test it. There are ways we can actually have a look at this. It's a little bit more work, but absolutely worth doing, because then we get to see what the bang for buck actually is. And we've got to remember, this is public money we're spending. This is public monies, and we're all very short on public monies now, so it's something that we really need to be very mindful of as we do it. And that's why I think evidence-based practice, evidence-based policing is absolutely vital. You want to be able to put your money into things that work, and more importantly, stop doing the things that don't.
I think that's such an important point that, you know, we talk about a lot in social science as we're training to be social scientists, but the public, and if you ever talk to like STEM researchers, right, who all their stuff is straight up experiments, and we're like, well, when you're dealing with social problems and a criminal legal system, you can't randomly assign people to treatments in this scenario. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a way to gather evidence. And I think that's so important, that it's not all just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. There are groups like yours who are rigorously evaluating things.
Absolutely, and that's just it. And that's the one thing I've learned in the social sciences, in that there are a myriad of different ways of doing things. Look, we've done randomised control trials on training to see what impact it has, but not just looking at training from the perspective of, did it work over the 2 weeks of the training course? Yeah, that was good. That's very easily done, because I've had a control group of people who applied and didn't get on the course versus ones who applied and did get on the course, and I can show the difference over the 2 weeks of the course. But take that a step further, we can actually then evaluate and follow the control group and the treatment group, both pre-course and post-course, for their work performance. So we've got measures that we can actually sit there and look at in the background and work out what their arrest rates, what their arrest numbers, what their clearance rates, all that sort of things actually looks like, what type of crimes are being allocated, how soon they're being allocated, how quickly the cases are actually being solved. We can look at that from a work performance perspective to see if the training course actually had any impact. And then from there, I've actually, and this is where I'm very quickly touch on this, but getting into the PhD, then I've actually looked at, did that training lead into improved work performance? Did that then lead into increased promotions? But on top of all that, I've looked at it from a gendered perspective as well, because the whole idea behind what I did was to see if we could actually improve gendered advancement in the organisation.
Awesome.
But I didn't want to just look at the training course. I wanted to see how that translated across the training course into work performance, into promotions. Because for us, getting a promotion or moving from general duties into plain clothes involves an application process. To do that, you need work-based examples in that resume. So I wanted to see if we increase knowledge and skills to improve their work performance, to improve their essentially their resumes for promotion. So mixed bag of results, but
I was going to ask.
I can't tell you the 2-week course, pre and post, absolutely significant increase, both male and female, in knowledge and confidence. It was really interesting with the females with confidence, in that they were more confident to actually about getting a promotion than the males. But very similarly to other research, or at least some other findings that are out there, in that when I asked the females if they were confident they could, about their intention to get a promotion in the next 5 years, and their confidence in getting a promotion in the next 5 years, it was exactly the same both pre and post course. So they've got to be as confident about getting a job as they are about wanting to get that job. Whereas males, the idea that they might get a job in 5 years was low. Their confidence to get one was high.
That reminds me of cybersecurity practices. Sorry.
Yeah.
Men are very overconfident. Research seems to say.
Typical males, we need about 40% confidence we can do the job before we'll apply. And from what I've seen, the females actually want to have 100% confidence they can do the job before they'll apply.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, that feels about right.
And I've got to say, I've got some facts and figures to show that now.
Yeah, exactly.
But the one thing I can say is that leading into work performance, there were increases in certain areas of work performance, but there was no gender difference. And in the promotions, there was no statistical gender difference. When you look at it, I had essentially a 70-30 split for males females, which is representative of our organisation as well. When it came to promotions, it was an 80-20 split, so there was still leaning in favour towards the males. But there's other things which I'll draw out, which were interesting, in that we've still got, I'd suggest, vestiges of patriarchal organisation, in that there seems to be unconscious bias in case allocation. Where males will get allocated certain cases, females other cases, and some of those cases the males get allocated are the ones which would play better on resumes.
Right. So on the show, we like to wrap up by asking our guests about what you think the average person should know about policing cybercrime. What's a takeaway that could really be useful to the layperson or someone unfamiliar with cyber policing?
Are you talking from the what the person should do, or what police can or should do?
Anything and all of the above.
From my perspective, the one message I really like to get out to people is that if it looks too good to be true, it is. Don't click on the link. We're all vulnerable for different scams, for different types of cybercrime. It's the human element for me that is the most important. It's if we can actually stop from clicking on the links, that's going to eliminate a lot of phishing. It's going to eliminate a lot of the actual unlawful intrusions into different systems, different areas. And people fall prey for relationship scams, puppy scams, ticket scams, all this sort of thing. The scammers, they use social engineering to prey on us. We need to be very diligent about what we click on, what we look at. We can hover over links, we can check on them. There's a range of different things we can do to protect ourselves. So the biggest thing I'll say to you is, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And if you think you've been in a relationship with someone who won't show their face, or who won't agree to meet you, or is always having financial troubles, get the hell out.
That is very sound advice that everyone should take. Just had some conversations this morning about, we would call them the grandparent scam here, where it's an AI voice indicating, oh, I need money because something happened. It's just got to be close enough, but it flies.
And with that one, we call it "Hey Mum" over here because it's always "Hey Mum, my laptop broke." But with that one, it's simple as, and I know they're listening to voices, everything. Ask them for their name. Ask them for the address. They don't have details. They go off generic. So one of the best remedies I've actually seen for that one is I've actually had a friend turn around and go, it was someone pretending to be their child, and they're going, "What's your name?" Yeah, because normally I'm your favourite eldest, or I'm your favourite. They won't even give a gender. I'm your favourite child, or I'm your favourite eldest. So it's just like, yeah, no, well, give me your name, give me your address. Ask for specifics. They will not have them.
Yep, that is perfect advice. And we know you're busy, so we will let you go. But it was excellent to have you on. We can't wait to hear a little bit more about how the presentation goes at IACP, and we'd love to hear more about how the consortium is going when you have time.
Absolutely. Love to keep in touch. Thank you very much for the opportunity and for probably the self-styled rant.
Yeah, that's what we're all about. That's the beauty of a podcast. You get the opportunity to rant as much as you want.
And I will say that the views espoused here are all my own.
Yes.
Not representative of any agency or group.
Absolutely. A good disclaimer never hurts.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'd love to have you on again. And thanks, everybody. And we look forward to having you join us the next time we cross the firewall. Thanks for listening to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. This is a production of the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University, produced by J.J. Thomas. The thoughts and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and the guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the university. If you have a comment or a question about the show, please email us at crossingthefirewall@gmail.com. Also, make sure that you follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for more information. And if you're enjoying us on your favorite podcast app, please make sure that you like the show and leave us a review so that way everybody knows what we're up to. And if you're listening in on YouTube, make sure that you like us and subscribe so that way you're staying up to date on everything that is Crossing the Firewall.